we will, and if we can't,
Okay.
we'll figure it out after.
All right, I think we are live. Good evening, everyone. We apologize for the late start. We're actually having some trouble with our closed captioning. If we aren't able to get that working, we will add it in after the fact when we post the recording, but we are trying to work on that in the background. I'm Kimberly Petersen. I'm the Chief of Police with the Fremont Police Department, and really just want to welcome you here tonight. Thank you for spending some time with us. This is our 2020 year in review. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to start our presentation. And this is not working, but we'll move to this. Okay. Already having some trouble. It's not clicking through. All right, Con, I guess you're on. Let's stop my sharing. Looks like you're going to be sharing the screen from your end, Con. Okay, go ahead and move to the first slide. Put it in a slideshow. There we go. Thank you. Next. So again, I'm Kim Petersen. I'm here tonight with two of my captains. I have Captain Sean Washington and Captain Fred Bobbitt. They're going to help me do this year in review with all of you. And here's the agenda for the evening. We're going to start off with highlights, significant events from 2020. We're going to go a little bit in depth on how we managed COVID-19. We're going to go through our significant crime data for 2020. Then we're going to move into our crime reduction strategies, particularly around gun violence and commercial burglaries. And then we will cover responses to changing community expectations. At the end, we'll have 15 or 20 minutes, depending on how long the presentation goes, where we'll be able to do some question and answer. You will be able to type in the chat, and we will also take some live questions. If we do end up having some folks who want to do more of a community statement, that's okay too, but we will limit those to about 1 minute. Okay, next. I always like to start my presentations about the police department with just a little bit of orientation on our mission and philosophy. So our mission here at Fremont Police Department is public safety through professional law enforcement. We are a highly trained, highly professional department that is very much focused on your safety. Our values are dedication, integrity, professionalism, and community partnership. We embrace a community policing philosophy, but we utilize an intelligence-led policing strategy. Now, with the community policing philosophy, there's no one definition of what community policing is, but what it means to us is that we police in partnership with all of you. We recognize that policing is only effective when we have the consent of the community, and so we're always striving for that. Regarding intelligence-led policing strategies, we're going to go into that in a little more depth later on. Next. Now, the year 2020 had so much change for really all of us in this on this planet, but particularly in the law enforcement profession. We realized as we came toward the end of the year that it was time to update our department goals. We broadened them a little bit. We put them into 3 basic categories. And the first category is really crime and safety. And so that's the first bullet point there. This is our goal under the heading of crime and safety. We want to provide public safety utilizing data-driven policing strategies focused on reducing crime and protecting the community. The next goal is in the category of community engagement. We realized through the year that we had to make this an even higher priority than we have made it in the past. So we've brought that up to the level of a department goal. We want to continue to build trust through open and transparent dialogue with our community. And then the third goal is focused around our people, who we hire, how we train them. We're going to continue to recruit and hire exceptional people who reflect our community's values, provide progressive training that exceeds industry standards, and we're going to support our employees' long-term health and wellness. Next. So I'm going to start here with a few snapshots. You're going to have to click in on each one. On next. So this is total calls that we received into the dispatcher, nearly 300,000 total 911 and non-emergency calls for service were received by our dispatch center. And that's for both Fremont and Union City because we dispatch for both cities. Next. 96,897 of these were unique Fremont calls for service. And out of those, next, 55,000 of those resulted in a dispatched call for service, where either an officer or a CSO actually went out to take a call. So the remainder could be online reports, they could be informational, they could just be questions, etc. Next slide. All right, we're going to hit just a couple of important data points that I know that our community is always interested in, and you know, we can ask questions more in depth later on. One click, Con. So we wrote over 15,000, nearly 16,000 original police reports documenting various crimes, suspicious circumstances, etc. So nearly 16,000 police reports. Last year, we had 2 homicides. We had 4 hate crime reports, and we experienced 9 home invasion robberies. Next. In the category of traffic, we had 384 traffic injury collisions. We had 4 fatal traffic collisions. 2 were automobiles versus pedestrians. 1 was an automobile versus a bicyclist, and 1 was an automobile versus automobile. We also had 89 DUI arrests. This next category is in around use of force. So we had 107 separate use of force incidents. And when you divided the number of incidents that we had overall, that was 0.2% use of force rate, which was exactly what it was the year prior. We had 1 officer involved shooting, and we had 5 professional standard complaints from community members. Next. I'm going to just touch on some of the major events that we dealt with as a police department in 2020. We had major changes at the beginning of the year in laws on use of force. Like everybody else on this planet, we dealt with COVID-19. And through that, we were able to provide uninterrupted service to the community. George Floyd's tragic death in May led to a significant social upheaval and change. It led to the largest protests that we have ever seen in Fremont, led to the Defund the Police movement. That also spurred us to initiate a community outreach effort via Engage Fremont. And we also we continue to deal with our school resource officer reimagining. We don't yet have that reestablished, but we hope we are currently working with the school district, and we do hope to reestablish that program. And those were just some of the things we dealt with. In addition to that, we had Fremont's first ever curfew to prevent looting and violence. We had the presidential election, and then we had the Capitol overrun, which of course was in 2021, but was related to the presidential election. Next. I'll talk a little bit about the impacts of COVID-19 because, like everyone else in this country, it was extraordinarily difficult for us. I mean, just think back to 1 year ago. None of us knew much about the virus. We had the same fears as everybody else. Remember how afraid we all were when we first had that shelter in place or that lockdown order. We didn't know what this meant. We knew, though, that we had to provide uninterrupted service. We knew that despite those dangers that we didn't understand, we didn't know enough about, we were going to have to go out there and show up for work the very next day. And our people did that. Our officers, our dispatchers, our support personnel have been here through it all, showing up every day to serve this public. We had to deal with these new personal safety requirements. Remember back then, nobody could get any masks. There were no N95s to be had. But our community really stepped up. We assigned a safety team, and we began receiving donated PPE and through it all, we were able to keep our personnel safe. Next. COVID-19 caused us to alter our police response in many ways and reporting. So you may have noticed last year we certainly pushed a lot more reports to online of the low-level reports. But even if it was one that we came out to, we would often take the initial report over the phone so that we wouldn't have too much face-to-face contact before going and collecting evidence and having that face-to-face contact. Next. COVID-19 really upended crime. We had significant changes in crime trends, and we're going to go a little bit more into that. But most notably, commercial burglaries are way up in 2020. Auto burglaries, interestingly, are down after many years of increases. Vehicle accidents are down. I don't think that'll surprise you, fewer people on the road. Shootings are up, not just here, but nationwide. Next. All right, so I'm going to start going into a little bit on the statistics, but first I want to do a little explanation for you. What we're going to be looking at are our Part 1 crimes. These are called our Uniform Crime Report statistics. These are used nationally by all agencies through reporting to the FBI. There's 18,000 police departments in this country, but we all use the same reporting method to report to the FBI, even though the laws in each state differ. We use this reporting format so that you can compare apples to apples across the US. So Part 1 crimes, the statistics that make up Part 1 crimes, which are over here on the left bars, there are 4 violent crimes and 4 property crimes. So the violent crimes include forcible rape, robbery, murder and non-negligent manslaughter together, and then aggravated assault. There are also 4 property crimes: arson, motor vehicle theft, and larceny theft. So if you go to the middle graph there, we've got, that is the violent crime. You can see that our violent crime numbers are up very slightly from 400 total in 2019 to 407 in 2020. So a very small increase there. And then you move over to property crime and you can see a real jump in our property crime of 27%. And the set of bars over on the left, those are both of those together. Both of those together showed an increase of 25% in 2020. Next. We're going to go a little bit more in depth into this. So now we're just looking at the violent crimes. So the little tiny bars on the left, those are our homicides. Now it did go up 100%, but that's from 1 homicide in 2019 to 2 in 2020. And that actually is right in line with our recent past. You can see the other years prior to that. Moving over to rape, you can see that rape has actually been trending down for several years. And it was down again last year, 22%. Moving over to robbery, we saw a decrease in 2019 and again in 2020, another significant decrease of 18%. Moving over to aggravated assault, you can see that we experienced quite a bit of a jump. Now, if you look at the gray bar, 2018, we dropped down in 2019, and then we jumped back up over both of those last year in 2020. And let's switch to the next slide. Let's go into property crimes. So starting from the left, that is auto theft, and you can see that's the last 5 years. Look at that jump. We had several years trending down from, looks like 2017. Since 2017, we've been trending downward. And we saw this, live and firsthand when COVID first hit and we had that shelter in place. All of a sudden, everybody was stealing cars. It went up 87%. Theft from vehicle, that's the next set of bars. That was up slightly 5%. Moving over to residential burglary. After many years of a downward trend, last year is the first year we have had an upward tick in several years, and that was up 17%. Commercial burg, this was the one that impacted us the most. We had a jump of 92% on commercial burglaries. So that is a reason we have implemented some strategies to fight commercial burglaries, which we'll be talking about soon. And then larceny theft, that also went up 11%. So I think, the question is why? And, we can't give you a definitive answer because the drivers of crime are very complex. I can certainly talk about some of the potential causes. the economy, COVID rebellion, zero bail. That we have been working under the zero bail policies since April of last year. And basically what that requires is that even for felony crimes, we issue a citation rather than taking people to jail for anything below a crime that is categorized as serious or violent. So that means if somebody steals your car and we catch them, they pull over, we write them a citation and they walk away. And we literally have experienced catching someone in stolen vehicles twice in one day. It's very disheartening for us. And that is the choice of Alameda County to continue this policy. So we're hoping that they will revert back to the old system at some point in the near future. There's also the fact that because of COVID, there was a big push to reduce our numbers in the jail. And so we've really cleared out our jails and put people back out into the community. And our court system has been practically frozen for an entire year. It's incredibly backlogged right now. And then we also have to acknowledge that the current climate for policing is difficult. And I think it's important to acknowledge that police officers are frankly less willing to do proactive work for fear of making mistakes or even backlash and public anger sometimes when they do, what they're trained to do. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. Next slide, please. Talk about firearms and shootings because we, like most of the country, have seen a real increase in these things. So I wanted to show you the 5-year numbers for, this is just firearms possession arrests. So back in 2017, we had 38, then 37, 2019 was 27. We had a big jump in 2020 of 44. Already in 2021, we've already made 12 unique firearms possession arrests. Next slide. As you might anticipate, we believe that this having more guns in the community is likely to lead to increased shootings. And I believe we are starting to see that. So in 27, we've averaged right around 20, 19 to 20 for several years. 2020 was no different. We still had 19. That was right on par with the years before. But already in 2021, we have experienced 12 shootings through the end of March. So we are on track for potentially for our highest year ever. Next slide, please. Now, having given you all of that bad news, I do think it's important to ground ourselves by taking a look at how we are doing as a city compared to other cities, because even with the bad news that I've just given you on crime trends from 2020, I do want you to recognize that Fremont is still a very safe city, especially for a city of our size. Remember that we're not a small suburban town anymore. We are a large city. We have 230,000 people. What we started doing a few years ago is comparing our UCR data against some of our neighboring agencies. Now, the UCR data can lag a bit, so we have to use 2019 data. We weren't able to compare with 2020 data because it just wasn't available for all of these cities. But here is the 2019 comparison. If you take a look, we have Pleasanton PD on, I'm looking at violent crime now, so I'm looking at the bars on the left. If you go left to right, we've got Pleasanton PD, San Leandro PD in the orange, Hayward in the gray, Fremont right in the middle in the yellow. You can see that we are right on par with several of those cities that I think you would anticipate would be some of the safer cities, and turns out they are. So we're right on par with Walnut Creek in the green and Tracy on the far right there. When you go over to property crime, you can see that we're actually in 2019 the lowest of that bunch. And once UCR data is available for all these other cities, we'll take a look at that again for the 2020 data. Okay, next slide. All right, so I'm going to be handing off to Captain Sean Washington, and I'm not sure if you're aware of it or not, but I will be retiring this fall after 25 years. And the city manager, Mark Dene, has already named Captain Sean Washington as the person who will be taking over the helm. And I am extremely excited for this department, for this city. Captain Washington is incredibly ready, and I believe he is the perfect person to take over the helm at this department. And I know you're going to be in good hands. So let me introduce you to Captain Sean Washington, who will do this next portion.
All right. Well, thank you, Chief. I am truly, first of all, good evening to everyone. I'm truly humbled and honored and excited at the same time to have this unique opportunity to lead this organization as we move into the future. So I understand the responsibility associated with being the Chief of Police for the Fremont Police Department. And I look forward to working with the community to address our crime issues. I want to take a moment to talk about our intelligence-led policing philosophy here at the police department. The core principles, or what we really try to accomplish, is reducing or preventing crime, increase community safety, and then build public trust and legitimacy. Why we feel that this is the most effective policing philosophy is that we go after the individuals that we feel are having the greatest impact to our community. So we're not casting a wide net, hoping to capture criminals that are impacting our community. We use intelligence and information to go after the individuals that we know are causing the most harm. It is designed to align resources and focus efforts. Technology plays a huge piece of ILP, or intelligence-led policing. It enhances our ability to identify and ensure that we're going after the correct individuals. It helps verify information to assist us with holding accountable the right people. But the biggest part is our community partnership, our education, communication, and transparency is the biggest ILP assets, which helps us ensure professional public safety and building public trust. So I want to just start there with, as I go through some of the crimes that we've focused on recently, I wanted to go through and explain ILP, our intelligence-led policing, so you have an understanding of our policing philosophy that we feel is appropriate for this community. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about our crime reduction strategies on gun violence. As the chief mentioned, shootings nationwide are up. Our region is not exempt to this trend. And here's a recap of the gun violence we've recently experienced here in Fremont. So we've had 12 shootings since January 1st, 2021. 3 of those have been officer-involved shootings. In 2 of those cases, the suspect fired multiple rounds at officers. That's an example of the level of violence that we're experiencing in this community at this particular time. And then we had 1 firearm-related homicide as well this year. So that's a recap of what gun violence we've experienced over the last 3 or 4 months in our community. And with the next slide, we'll get into some of the strategies that we've implemented to try to reduce the impact of gun violence. So with the cooperation of our specialty units, we created a gun violence reduction team. And so I want to take a few minutes to talk about what this team is, so you have a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. In response to the sharp increase in gun violence, FPD, like many other law enforcement agencies, felt that we had a duty and an obligation to try to mitigate the significant impact that gun violence is having within our community. The Gun Violence Reduction Team was created, which redirected already existing resources within the police department towards gun violence. We made gun violence, but gun violence has been a priority already over the years. But with the recent increase in shootings, those specific units quickly became overwhelmed and needed some more supportive resources. So that's what this team is. It's made up of highly competent and highly trained criminal investigators, and they have advanced understanding of policy, de-escalation techniques, restraint and alternative tactics, as well as use of force options. One of the goals is education. Unfortunately, with some of our shootings, we know that our youth have been involved in a couple of these shootings, and one in particular that was extremely violent. One of the shooters was 15 years old. So understanding that, we wanted to have an education campaign associated with this reduction team. So youth engagement, parent support programs, and youth counseling services, as well as social media, is part of the education program. Prevention is the next strategy of the gun violence reduction team. Utilizing intelligence-led policing, we try to identify the offenders who are causing the greatest amount of harm within our community and are likely armed with a firearm, and also who have demonstrated the propensity for violent acts. In fact, we had a recent success where we received information that a juvenile was in possession of a high-powered rifle. We worked with the parents to recover the rifle, and were able to take that gun off the street and potentially intervene and steer that juvenile in the right direction. Investigation obviously is part of this team as well. We do need to follow up after a shooting occurs, but also we want to try to prevent it by using investigative tools to identify those that we think may cause harm within our community. And then, of course, we're going to identify those that we feel are truly dangerous and launch an apprehension efforts to try to go and arrest those that we know are likely to cause more gun violence. Next slide. So let's talk about commercial burglaries for a moment. We utilize data-driven strategies to try to focus on hotspots, repeat victim businesses, and prolific burglary offenders to focus in our resources and try to mitigate the impact that commercial burglaries have had. Like the chief talked about and what was shown on the previous slides, we had a significant sharp increase on commercial burglaries within the city over the past year. So some of the strategies that we utilized were high visibility patrols to include overnight hours in the south end of Fremont, working with our business and community partners for crime education, promote video surveillance systems, environmental changes like as lighting and signage, those type of things that maybe could help. And then we collaborated with various city teams. An example of this is working with human services and our unhoused community members. We realized that some of those folks in that community have been identified through intelligence-led policing to be responsible for many of our commercial burglaries in one particular area. So understanding we may need some other supportive departments within the city, we partnered with human services to try to help mitigate that impact. Next slide. All right, so response to changing community expectations. I wanted to talk about this a little bit because over the past year, we've listened to our community, and we really had to double down on some of our efforts to explain the why. What is it that we do and what are we about? And that's okay. That education and that communication is important. I'll start by talking about the 8 Can't Wait campaign. This was a nationwide call to raise awareness and obtain information concerning 8 specific administrative and operational law enforcement policies. It's important to understand that here in Fremont, if we don't have a policy, we always follow the law. So the law will be our policy if we don't have one specific to a particular concern. I'll just recap some of these 8 areas. 1 was to require de-escalation. 2 was duty to intervene. 3 was exhaust all means before shooting. 4, ban chokeholds and strangleholds. 5, require warning before shooting. 6 was to require comprehensive reporting. 7, require use of force continuum. And then 8, ban shooting at moving vehicles. So in response to that, we produced a document that you can find on our website that addressed how we satisfy all of those 8 policies that were listed there. Again, following the law and having specific policies to remind our staff of expectations and how to best serve the community was important. Next slide. All right, and then finally, I'd like to talk about professional standards and accountability, which is important. It's important for our community to understand how we hold ourselves accountable and how you all hold us accountable as well. I'll start with professional standards. Policy updates. Our foundation, what we try to do is follow the 2015 Task Force on 21st Century Policing. If you're not familiar with that particular document, it really outlined the foundation for law enforcement agencies throughout the country. Things like building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, training and education, and officer wellness were viewed as the foundational objectives of every law enforcement agency. So with using that, we took a look internally and we revised our de-escalation and use of force policies. It was mandated per SB 230 that we had to do it by January 1st, 2021. But we took a comprehensive look at our use of force policy, obtained best practices, consulted with our legal team, and also consulted with some of our subject matter experts to produce what we feel is a very effective and comprehensive policy responsive to modern day policing. We also updated our pursuit policy, which made it a little bit more restrictive to balance the need to pursue an individual and capture a criminal versus public safety, which is always paramount in everything that we do. We also began to draft a deconfliction policy, and this is where we make sure that we follow all the steps necessary to ensure that we have accurate and up-to-date information prior to taking some sort of enforcement action. And then our bias and fair policing policy, we made a few adjustments to that as well. As it relates to training, the department developed a comprehensive department training plan. That was important because we wanted to make sure that we were able to demonstrate to the community that we stayed on track with our training objectives. Things like cultural diversity, de-escalation and alternative tactics, advanced supervisor and manager training, and then expanded in-house academy curriculum, which is important so that the young officers that come out of the academy come to an in-house here, and we wanted to embed even more training on how to best serve this community because they go to the academy elsewhere, right? And so we want to bring them in and iron out expectations as far as professional standards and make sure that they have an understanding of how the diverse community that they're going to serve. The other thing that we did is we recently partnered with Ohlone College. They reached out to the police chief and they wanted to partner to develop a certificate program and an associate's degree program for officers who may not have had access to higher education. That's beneficial both to the officer or employee as well as enhancing their ability to serve the community. And then accountability. So we all want to hold each other accountable, and we are accountable to this community. But also, we're accountable to each other as a staff. So we utilize after-action reviews, after critical incidents to really self-reflect and see if there was anything we could have done a little bit better. We conduct an annual needs assessment to identify training needs, equipment needs, and things like that in order to move forward and continue to improve. We've enhanced our supervisor use of force review process. And if you don't know, every use of force incident supervisors are required to do an initial review to ensure that it was within policy. And then there's several steps after that to ensure that it's reviewed at multiple levels. We also are required to adhere to the law regarding Racial Identity Profiling Act, which is RIPA. And this is where every law enforcement agency has to capture certain data with every stop or detention that they make. So it's things like perceived race, age, gender, those type of things we have to capture. We have to start capturing that information by January 1st, 2022, but we're very hopeful and excited about potentially starting that earlier. We also have a new data reporting system that's captured on our website that provides yearly summaries of things like use of force, the type of force that was used, the number of calls for service, and those type of things that we wanted to produce to the community in an effort to demonstrate our transparency. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to give you a little bit of information regarding some of our strategies and some of the things we've done over the past year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Bobbitt, who will provide some information on community engagement. Thank you all.
Thank you, Captain Washington. Well, good evening. First off, I would just like to thank all of you for spending your Wednesday evening with us as we share a lot of information with you. I'm excited to cover community engagement, being that I grew up here in the community and have spent the last 36 years as a member of the organization. So what I will talk about, if we can move to the next slide, is a few things related to community engagement. So as soon as we get back to the slides, Hannah, if you can move to this. Slight technical difficulties, but we'll pull it together. Okay, are we ready to? I think we're good to go. Okay, if you can click on it, click the next one. Okay. Okay, perfect. So the first thing we're going to talk about is elevating community engagement with our new department goals. This is what the chief spoke about earlier. So it's important that we share with you is our community engagement unit is now a direct report to the office of the chief. That's something that we're really excited about. It gives that direct line of communication with our community engagement unit to the chief. And in addition to that, it's also supported by a captain. So that really will assist us in sharing that important information with the office of the chief. As we move to the next point, we will discuss reimagining and exploring outreach opportunities. So how we'll accomplish this is by recognizing our growth areas and how we can improve as an organization. Some examples would be, how can we better communicate with our faith community, with our youth, and then, with our community members that we have learned, we have community members that really lack access to us. So we really want to focus on developing programs to help us improve in this area. We can go to the next. And then engage Fremont. That's something that we're really excited about. And if we click to the next slide, I'd like to share some information with you. So as the chief mentioned earlier, this is an unprecedented community engagement effort during the summer of 2020. And you can access that full report on our website. But some of the things I'd like to talk about is the 2 town hall meetings that were held. We had 6 community dialogues. We actually had an open city hall online community survey, which was important. And also, in addition to that, the city hired consultants to analyze data to really help us move into that next direction. And you can also access that full report from Engage Fremont on our website. Click to the next slide. So how do we move forward? We really, we really processed a lot of information this past year and want to focus on how can we be better as an organization with our community. We've always said that, we really focus on engaging at all levels, but, we can honestly say that we need to improve. So what we plan on doing as we move forward is, one, listen, inform, and then be able to measure how we're doing. And I'll talk a little bit about how we'll accomplish that. So one thing that we're excited about is we've developed a new community relations policy. So this will be a department policy that will be shared throughout the organization, which will give direction on how we should engage with our community. We're excited about creating an annual community survey. This is an opportunity for us to be vulnerable with our community so that we can learn from all of you with how we can improve. Another thing that we're excited about is how can we enhance, the area of cultural diversity amongst our employees. So one way that we've already started is we had a meeting with our Tri-City Interfaith Council to assist us with enhancing our awareness in the area of cultural diversity. It was a great meeting with several leaders from a number of faith-based organizations. And we were really excited with the ideas that they brought forward that will allow us to actually, utilize as we engage even better with our community. And as the chief stated earlier, our SRO program, trying to reimagine, trying to figure out how are we going to move forward, being able to provide that level of service to our school district, to our high schools, to our middle schools in a positive way. How can we truly engage and work together? And then focus on youth services. It's extremely important that we engage with our youth and we continue to do our best in how we'll continue to engage. And as we get through this pandemic, we truly hope to have a stronger presence in the community and to reach our new established goals. So go to the next slide. And it's important that we share, and most of you probably know about this, is we have several avenues and ways that you can connect with us. Some of them are listed on the screen. We really want to focus on continuing to enhance how we use social media, but also how can we enhance how we have these in-person meetings to really enhance our ability to connect with each other. So as you can see on this slide here, there are several ways that you can connect with us, and we are truly looking forward as we move forward into the future, enhancing our ability in the area of community relations. So with that, I'll turn it over to the chief, and I really appreciate you being with us tonight. Chief?
Thank you, Captain Bobbitt. Okay, Con, next slide. We only have one slide left, and then we'll be moving into question and answer. So, one question that always comes up in these when we have community meetings is people want to know, hey, as a community member, what can I do? Well, as a community member and as a voter, one of the most important things you can do, click, Con, is participate. Get to know your legislators. Our state legislators here in Fremont are Assembly members Alex Lee and Bill Quirk. On the state Senate side of the House, we are represented by Bill Wykowski. And the reason why it's important that you get to know them is because every year in the legislative cycle, all the legislators in California are very busily making laws. Some of these laws are great and some are unnecessary or, in my view, detrimental. Now, I'm going to speak to you from a security perspective, and you are free to, disagree with my opinion, but I'm going to show you a little bit about some of the bills that I think are most concerning from a security perspective for us here in California. Next slide, or next click. Check out these bills. So Assembly Bill number 1509 by our own Alex Lee. Now this bill proposes to reduce enhancements for people who commit felonies when they are armed with a weapon. So for many, many years, if someone used a gun during the commission of a felony, There were enhancements for using that gun. There was a 10-year potential enhancement if you use the weapon while committing a felony, a 20-year for using the gun, and then 25 to life for killing somebody with that gun when committing a felony. Mr. Lee proposes to reduce those enhancements down to enhancements of 1, 2, and 3 years. So, that is concerning to me. Criminals, lifelong, we have some folks in our community, unfortunately, who are ongoing criminal offenders, and they know the law about use a gun, 10, 20 life. And I think this proposal would be damaging in terms of preventing crime. Senate Bill 82 by Nancy Skinner, and actually somebody wrote in a question about this. Right now, the crime of robbery, which is Penal Code 211, it's a felony crime. And that is defined as the taking of personal property in the possession of another, accomplished by means of force or fear. This bill proposes to reduce it to a petty theft if the suspect does not use a deadly weapon or if the force does not cause great bodily injury. So let me give you some examples. We have frequently in Fremont seen cases where maybe a woman is walking down the street and she's wearing a gold chain, and a suspect might stop, yank the necklace off her neck. Often that knocks her down. If that victim is not significantly injured, if she doesn't sustain a significant injury, great bodily injury is defined. So it's like a broken bone, stitches, use of loss of a limb. If it's not to that extent, then this proposes to reduce that to a misdemeanor. Again, from a security perspective, this doesn't make any sense to me. And that is a proposal by Nancy Skinner. Assembly Bill 333. This bill would repeal gang enhancements for the crimes of burglary, looting, felony vandalism, and some fraud crimes. Well, we here in Fremont and actually all around the Bay Area, prior to 2020, we're seeing a rash of auto burglaries, smash and grabs. People break into a locked vehicle, they steal your stuff. There was a ring of folks who were stealing laptops, thousands of them, and they were from a criminal gang. So, I think it's important to have those enhancements. We did make some arrests, major arrests in 2 of those cases where they were being done by actual criminal gangs. And then the last one I put up here is Senate Bill 210. And this is a bill by Scott Wiener. And this proposes to require law enforcement agencies to delete all of our automated license plate reader data within 24 hours if it does not match the hot list. That means, if it doesn't match a stolen vehicle. Again, incredibly problematic. This tool, automated license plate reader data, is an incredibly valuable tool for investigations after the fact. We very frequently solve series of crimes, whether it be home invasions, residential burglaries, any sort of burglary series. We have solved a couple of homicides that I can think of off the top of my head by being able to go back to our ALPR data and look to see which vehicles were in the area or were hitting off of our cameras around the times of the crime, and then maybe link them to earlier crimes as well. So this would be incredibly problematic. And again, I just want to put out there the caveat that this is just my opinion. From a security perspective, I did not go, I just gave you a very brief summary of the bills. There are more involved in each of these bills, but again, do your homework. You will not get a chance to vote on these bills if they are pushed through the House and the Senate and they make it over to the governor's desk. The governor could sign these things and these things could be law by next year. This is just a few of the ones I'm most concerned about. So that's why I listed them here. So with that, next slide, I think that's just the end slide. Oh, communicate. So write, call, set a meeting to share your concerns. If you are concerned about these bills, or if you support them, call the authors, call your own legislators. It's important, even if, let's say you don't agree with Nancy Skinner's bill. Don't just call her office, also call Mr. Lee, Mr. Quirk, or Mr. Wykowski, because your voice does matter in this. So take the time to make those calls. Okay, so with that, let's see. Give me a time right now. Okay, so we're going to do question and answer for 20 minutes. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to alternate between some of the written ones, and then we will also take live ones. So I do have some written ones here. I'll alternate. I think I've actually answered these 2 already. So Patricia Scitiero asks, what strategy is there for home robberies? Commercial burglaries doesn't typically include that. Correct. We do delineate home burglaries from commercial burglaries, but the strategies are very similar. We actually have had a focus on residential burglaries since 2012. That was when we began our intelligence-led policing. And so some of the strategies we began then was to really focus on the known offenders and then go wherever it required to make those arrests, to make those cases, make those arrests. So we really focused on that small proportion of people who were causing the most harm to the community. That was one of the strategies. We were able to help drive down the numbers all the way through until 2020. And like I said, 2020 is the first year we've seen that small uptick. Okay, I have more written, but I want to alternate with verbal questions. So Monica, can you call on some? Okay, Karen, go ahead. We're going to unmute you and then you can ask your question. I'm not hearing her. Are any of you hearing her?
Karen, go ahead and unmute yourself. I have given you access.
Okay, let's move on to the next question.
The number that ends in 6302, go ahead and unmute yourself. Sir, go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh, man.
Okay, we're not having too much luck there, so I'll switch back to a written one. Andy Rao asks, all these anti-crime bills, do we have any bills in favor of public safety police?
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. Yeah, it's a rough year for policing. There are a few, I can't think of any off the top of my head. But yeah, the law enforcement profession is definitely in the crosshairs of the legislature right now. Let's try one more verbal.
Hello,
caller.
Chief. Hello, Chief.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I can hear you.
My name is Surinder Pal Singh Walia. I own the business in the Fremont. I own the residential property also in Fremont.
Okay, you own a
What does-
residential?
Residential for the commercial properties.
Okay,
Since the last few years, the commercial properties break in and they took the cash register, they took the cash boxes, they break the glasses. After that, nothing is happening. On 10th of March, my store was breaking. They took
yes,
the
your
cash
store was
register.
broken into. Okay,
My restaurant was broken. They took the cash register. They
Okay.
break the glasses. They took
Yeah.
the cash boxes also. They took the iPad also. I think nothing has been done so far.
okay, so you're concerned about that specific case where your store
yeah.
was burglarized, correct? Yeah,
In the
I mean, I
same
don't know the
time-
specifics. Okay, I don't
In
know
the
the
same time-
specifics of,
In the same time, they break the donut shop across my store. And they took the cash register from there also.
okay,
We have good cameras. We have Thornton Junior High School across, and they go to good cameras too. We have McDonald's on the side. They go to good cameras also.
okay, so, sir, okay, good. So I understand you're asking about your specific burglary case. There's someone in the room that recognizes your name. You have emailed us several times and your case has been forwarded to investigations. So they've done the basic investigation. If they have not been able to find specific leads on your case, then the case probably is suspended at this point, but we can have someone in investigations contact you directly about your specific incident. But as far as commercial burglaries, we did see upticks in this, significant increases in commercial burglaries because so many businesses were closed, for the first half of the year from, between March and the summer. So we saw a significant rise in that. And that's why we've implemented those strategies that Captain Washington talked about. We've had several questions about the Karen Act. So now my understanding of the Karen Act is it's actually a proposal in San Francisco, so a local ordinance that proposes to create a specific crime for falsely accusing someone of committing a crime because of bias. So I guess you might think about some of those cases we've heard about in the media where, for example, a white woman, I believe in New York, was telling a gentleman who was Black that she was going to report that he was attacking her, and the police were going to come and arrest him. She knew, in her words, that they would come and arrest him. So she was clearly making this false report based on bias. So, that is something that has happened in the community, and it starts, and we started specifically working on this summer. Part of it is educating our community that when we receive calls, we try and weed out what we call bias by proxy. So for example, if somebody calls and says, hey, there's a person of X race in my neighborhood and he doesn't belong here, and we want you to come check him out. We don't just blindly say, okay, we'll be down there, and then we go, throw handcuffs on somebody. No, our dispatchers are trained to really ask a lot of questions about the behavior. It's not about what they look like, it's about what is the behavior. So, regardless of the person's look or the person's race or religion, what are they doing? Well, the person is looking into several vehicles and starting to pull on door handles. Well, now that's different, and let's say it's 2 a.m. Well, certainly that would lead us to believe that this person, regardless of, race, appearance, religion, it might be looking to break into cars or to steal something out of cars. So our dispatchers are trained to really look into that. Sometimes we get, sometimes a call does go through to the officers, and the sergeant or the officer or the lieutenant will call that caller back and again, ask more questions. So, an example we had earlier, or I guess late in 2020 is, we had someone call and say, hey, we want you to come check out these 2 men. They're of X race. They're in this coffee shop and want you to come check them out. They're acting suspicious. Okay, what are they doing? Well, they're passing a wallet back and forth and looking at it. Okay, tell me more. At this point, it doesn't sound like it reaches the level of a crime necessarily. And so the sergeant in that particular case, after questioning the caller more in depth, canceled the call, and we didn't go check into that. So now if that does happen, first of all, the Karen Act apparently is specific to San Francisco, but it is similar to a bill that is being proposed by Rob Bonta. I believe it was 1550, and that does propose at a statewide level to make to report a crime based on bias and make it illegal for doing that. So if that passes, we would investigate it in that way. We would look into what were the circumstances behind the call. If we did determine that the person was making a false report based on their bias, then we would make an arrest or a citation, depending on what level that crime was, and follow through with the DA's office. So that's how we would handle that. Do we have another live question, Monica?
Yes, we do. We have a John Reynolds. Go ahead and unmute yourself, John.
Chief, my bride and I have been residents of Fremont for almost 40 years, and we want to say on behalf of our family and the rest of the family of Fremont, thank you so much for the service you have provided to our city, and we wish you the best in retirement. Thank you again for all you've done for us.
Oh, well, thank you. That was very, very unexpected and welcome. Thank you. Really, it's the people, the men and women on the street who are doing the work that is in service to all of you, because it is dangerous out there. I think, as you all know, we've recently had 3 officer-involved shootings just this year alone, where we were either shot at or confronted with a weapon. So it is extremely dangerous work, but the men and women out there on the street are incredibly dedicated to your safety. I'm going to take, there's kind of a theme of questions around homelessness and, what's being done around the RVs, the encampments. There was one specific one about tents in the cemetery. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about homelessness. First of all, when there are encampments on private property, it is incumbent upon that property owner to call us, and we can help them with the procedure to get them to move people off of that private property. Now, when that happens, we always want to be cognizant of the fact that we need to offer services to folks. So we try and work in a way where we can offer services to our unhoused community. If they're willing to take advantage of those services, we provide it right then or connect them right there. And then if what we try and do is we try and get consent to move off of that private property. Gets much trickier in public property. First of all, COVID really threw things into disarray in terms of managing encampments. So with COVID-19, you know, there's a lot of legitimate concern in the community that breaking up encampments in the middle of a pandemic could lead to further COVID-19 spread. And so there were some state rules put in place for agencies that receive money to help manage homelessness. And really at the city level, there was there have been policies in place since the pandemic started where we actually, for the most part, don't move encampments unless it meets certain criteria in terms of danger, fire danger, proximity to children, et cetera. However, homelessness is very, you know, just at its core, homelessness is incredibly complex and it's a social problem. It is not a police problem, but we are a part of helping manage the negative impacts that can arise with our unhoused community and the rest of our community, because there are impacts. We understand that. That said, we are restricted in many ways. For example, if somebody sets up on a public sidewalk, as long as they aren't completely blocking that sidewalk or blocking a driveway, unless we have emergency housing to offer them right then and there, we actually cannot move them. That has been decided by the courts. So we actually cannot move. We can ask, we can request, and that's usually what we do if it's in a place where it's not, where it's clearly not appropriate for them to be, or might be a safety issue. We always try and request cooperation, but it's extremely difficult. You know, homelessness is driven by these huge social problems, and the police are not able to solve these social problems. We're talking, unemployment, underemployment, mental health, untreated mental health, on occasion, drug or alcohol abuse, domestic violence. You know, there are all kinds of drivers of this, and, making an arrest is not going to solve any of those things. However, we do sometimes have to intervene, and we do that as compassionately as we can. We always start by offering services. There was some questions about unhoused populations and how they're related to crime. We did take a look at that for 2020. Approximately 7% of our calls for service involved members of our unhoused community. So that could be anything from loud music causing a disturbance, or they could be victims of a crime. All of those would count in that 7%. And then surprisingly, 22% of the people that we arrested in 2020 do come from our unhoused communities. And also keep in mind that members of our unhoused community are actually victims of crime at a higher proportion than are the average community member as well. Okay, I'm not sure that that totally answered the exact question, but I think that gives you an overview of our what's going on with the homelessness in our community right now. Do we have another? Nobody else. Okay, so I'll read some more. Okay, can you provide us with information about the recent homicide, and what information can you provide the community about this recent homicide, since not much information has been reported? Lieutenant Tang, would you be able to answer this question with appropriately? Come on up. I'm going to hand off to Lieutenant Tang. He's in charge of our investigative unit, to make sure I don't release any information that I shouldn't release, because the investigation is still ongoing.
Hi there, thank you. So as of right now, the district attorney's office has declined to charge the resident who actually shot at the suspects of the home invasion. So they've officially decided not to charge that individual.
Maybe you could tell them the circumstances that led up to it.
Okay, so this is the homicide that we had, where a group of armed suspects approached a apartment complex unit. And as they were approaching the complex, we believe for some sort of drug activity, as they approached the front door, they began forcing entry into the front door of the apartment. And one of the residents behind the door opened fire and ended up striking and killing one of the suspects. So the district attorney's office decided not to charge the resident who fired that shot. But we are still investigating the group to determine who the remaining suspects are in that case. And if we do identify those folks, we believe we have a strong case for home invasion, which we would then present to the district attorney's office.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Here is one. When criminals are given a citation and released, what happens next? So then what happens is the officer completes the investigative report and sends that to the district attorney's office along with the citation. As I mentioned before, the courts have been incredibly, really frozen through 2020. There's a huge backlog. We're starting to ask the courts, but we just started the chief's level, asking the courts, when are we going to reopen? We have found there are some things going on virtually, but there has been a huge backlog. So I am concerned that many of these cases may be dropped, which is disappointing from an accountability perspective. Certainly some will be charged and some will be moved through the system, but it's going to be a big lift catching up after how frozen the courts have been in 2020. Okay. Let's see. What is being done to bring more police presence in the Ardenwood and North Fremont areas when it comes to sideshows? So sideshows, we have, seen a real increase in sideshow activity. It's not just a Fremont issue. This is a regional issue. This is something that we have seen, over the past couple of years. It kind of comes in waves, and we definitely are peaking right now. Unfortunately, some of these sideshow groups they're getting more brazen, and many of them are armed. We recently saw one in Oakland. When a sideshow happens, basically what a sideshow is people who are oftentimes car enthusiasts, but sometimes simply looking to cause trouble. They'll get together and they drive to various cities. If they come to our city, if we're able to chase them out, they'll move to the next city, they'll move to the next city, move to the next city. So it really happens all around the Bay. And some of these groups are organized as far away as Los Angeles, and they'll say, hey, let's hit Oakland, Saturday night. And then pretty soon Oakland is inundated with 800 cars filled with armed people in many cases. Recent one that happened in Oakland, there is some video that I have seen of automatic weapon fire. So it's incredible. And they overwhelm our resources very quickly. So when sideshows happen, we have a full plan to mobilize. But even if we send our entire group, our entire midnight shift out there, they usually happen at night, recognize that we are quickly overwhelmed. So we have to take an approach. And a lot of these groups, they have whole strategies to keep us out or to isolate us. So it can be very dangerous for us. So we have to move in a very strategic way. We call in outside agency help. We call for air support. And usually by the time we're able to muster those numbers, then they get the hint that we're serious and they will move on. So, but we do have to approach it carefully because we can't send, 5 cops into a group of 100 armed people who are ready to challenge police. So we have to be strategic about how we approach it, but we do try and move them out. If we're able, with some of these, we can follow up afterwards and tow vehicles, but oftentimes they're from out of town, so it can be very costly. Sometimes their plates don't match. Don't forget about that bill proposing to get rid of license plate reader data. That would totally take away our ability to go after them after the fact. So it's a difficult problem, but we are working on it regionally. We have a few experts in-house. We are working with I'll call it a task force, but we're working with a South County Task Force led by CHP, and they have wonderful resources. And so they have been leading on this, and we have regular meetings with them. We've been doing training with our internally and with this task force group. Ben Yee asks, do you think we'll be able to have National Night Out this year? I'm going to ask Geneva, what do you think?
I hope so.
We're hoping so. We think so. The governor says he's going to open things up June 15th. Of course, in COVID, things change every day. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed, and we're going to plan like it's going to happen, and we're going to hope that it happens. All right, let's see. What is, 2 more minutes. Okay, what is the current status of the traffic unit? I understand they were reassigned to patrol at the onset of the pandemic. That's true. At the beginning of the pandemic, we did emergency staffing for all of patrol. However, we're back to regular patrols. We do have a traffic unit. Right now it is 12 people. We are moving 2 of those back to patrol to keep our patrol numbers up in the summertime. So we will be down to, I believe, 10 at that point. But we do have a full-time traffic unit. Not many agencies actually have a full-time dedicated traffic unit anymore. So they are back out there. Oh, I like this one. Andy Rao, thank you. I tip my hat to everyone in FPD for keeping things business as usual during the pandemic. Me as well. Tip my hat to the men and women who showed up every single day during a really scary time. I don't know what that one means. Let's see. Sorry, I'm searching through here. That was a Karen Act. Karen Act. How do you address the defund the police issue? Oh, that's a good one. I mean, I think it starts with education. You know, I understand that's very much the whole idea of defund comes out of kind of that cancel culture of you know, young adults in our community, but I'm painting with a broad brush there. I say that because I have one in my own home. I have a 23-year-old in my home, and we have a lot of interesting conversations around the dinner table. But, you know, it comes around to education. You know, we are proponents of doing things like moving mental health calls out of the police department handling. We would be very interested not to allow another agency to handle calls related to the homeless. But the truth is, there's nobody else to do that right now. Now we have our own mobile evaluation team where we pair clinicians with police officers. They have been a wonderfully effective group, but they're not on 24/7. You know, we don't have service, say at nighttime or on the weekends. So we would love some help with that. We're asking the county for assistance with that because really, it really lies within the purview of county's behavioral health. So we're asking them, hey, please give us the resources, bring us some homeless outreach support. So, but until that happens, we're the ones who are going to answer your call. You know, nobody else is going to pick up the phone at 3 a.m. You know, you're not going to get a psychologist out there at 3 a.m. on Christmas. We're the ones who do it because you ask and because you need us to do it. And we'll continue to do that until there are some other structures set up to assist. Oh, this is interesting. How does a police chief manage to mitigate her personal political beliefs with a community that spans a wider political philosophy? Well, we're always trying to balance, right? Our role is to police an entire community. Our role is to answer to an entire community. And so we have to take that stance that we support and we police everyone in our community from you know, the wealthiest member of our community to our unhoused community. All of you are community members, and our job is to be neutral and to serve everyone equally. So that is what, you know, even the youngest officer is trained to do. So I think we're coming to the end, and I think I've answered actually most of these. Did you just hand a new one? Oh, how many officers work the night shift? It ranges. I believe our minimums are 13, but it ranges in when you add in sergeants and extra bodies, it ranges anywhere from 13 to 17 at night. Okay, well, with that, I want to thank all of you for being here this evening. And I want to thank the men and women of this police department for what they do for all of you. It was a tough year for everyone, but it was an extraordinarily difficult year for law enforcement. And these folks showed up every day. They were there to answer the phone for you in your worst times. They have gone out and gone after the dangerous criminal offenders at their own risk to make sure that you are safe, to get guns off the street. And we're going to continue to do that going forward. And we're just really grateful to the officers and out on the street, and the investigators behind the scenes, and the dispatchers receiving those calls in dispatch. So thank you to our personnel. Thank you to all of you for being here tonight.